Joey Taylor, welcome. Welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being a yes to this. Some folks know you that I've been flocking with for a while. A lot of folks know you in other worlds, but would love to hear just a little bit more about who you are as a person. We connected through the bespoken world, which we'll get to in a little bit, but bring us to present day. Who's Joey? Where you been? And yeah, we'll get to your work life, but if you could just start with other characteristics, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I am a dad. I'm a spouse. I do some storytelling facilitation that we'll talk about in a little bit. I live in Cincinnati. Um, those are some, I don't know, some character qualities of me. I have a pretty good beard, I think, but the hair on the top of my
Yes.
head is gone, so it's kind of like migrated south a bit.
Yeah.
Um,
I was gonna comment. It looks like you even have a fresh fade even for our
yeah, I
chat
did that
today.
for
So
you. I did that
no, I'm
for you.
sure. I'm
Yeah.
honored. Nice.
Yeah. So I don't know. I
Nice.
mean, there's a lot of the things that I think make me who I am, you know.
Mhm.
My friendship with you is one of those things. My friendship with other
Mhm.
people. Um,
Mhm.
I I have this hobby of collecting the way that people define identity.
Mm.
And one of the recent ones that I've heard is you are what you pay attention to. So I like
Mm.
that one a lot.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
I've been paying attention a lot to my kids recently, so that's why I started off with my as being a dad. So
Okay. Well, I was
yeah,
gonna ask, yeah, what's been taking your attention? But if you think about your kids, what's been a bright spot of them absorbing some of your attention lately?
yeah. So I'm sure the parents like understand the challenges of childcare, and my oldest Lee just happened to get into this nature camp for the summer,
Ooh.
and it's always a big question to what extent this place will be a good fit for him. And he's been there for
Mm.
2 weeks or for 2 days now, and he
Mhm.
loves it so much. And my partner Brooklyn was talking to one of the other kids' moms, who is this other kid is like pretty shy, I guess. And the
Mhm.
other mom said to my partner, we're just so thankful for Lee, my son, because he was the
Mm.
first person to say hello to my child and to welcome him in. And that's just like
Mm. Wow.
classically, he's always
Oh, nice.
the welcomer. So I love that.
Mm.
And then my littlest one, I've just been on a trip for a couple of days, and I came back, and she greeted with me by saying, she's 18 months old, by saying "dad, dad," and running into my arms. So that was really great too.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
I love that.
yeah,
Gotta feel great to hear.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I imagine that you have similar qualities in your parenting that you do in your professional world. You're really grounded. You're very sincere. You're caring. You have a great sense of humor. And for me, as someone who's collaborated with you in a professional sense, you have a great, um, I think, a steadiness that really helps, especially when helping people not just share story, but harvest their stories, especially when it comes to
Mm,
challenge or things they've overcome. But
mhm.
before we get into the story and process work that you've developed, bring me to your journey to Bespoken, and then tell us for our audience, what is Bespoken, and what are some of the things going on with it recently.
Yeah, so Bespoken started as like a public storytelling show organization. So it started with the intention of holding, I think it was initially monthly events, so like monthly
Hmm.
storytelling kind of events. You were a big part of this. Um,
Fun.
and my background's not in storytelling. I'm not sure if anybody's background is actually in storytelling, if that's even a
Hmm.
thing, right? But
Yeah.
I guess depending on how you define it. But my background is actually in international community development. And so I lived and worked in the Middle East for about 5 years before moving to Cincinnati
Oh, wow.
in 2015.
Mhm.
I started working for a little organization called Amos, which is the community organizing organization here in Cincinnati. And then a month into that, I was actually diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Mhm.
Um, So that's weird. It's a weird thing to talk about now, because I mean, some of the work that you and I do, we talk about how we're able to be the author of our own stories, and we get to
Mm,
choose like which parts of the stories we share and which parts of the stories that we make meaning of, right? And
mm,
so at this phase of my life, I feel like I'm beginning more and more to try to intentionally kind of turn the page on that part of my life.
mm,
But
mm,
um, in terms of my relationship with Bespoken, it was a pretty crucial part. So in like a year later, there was this big election that happened where somebody was elected that a lot of us were a little upset about. I don't know if
mm.
you remember this or not, but you were there at this meeting. I'm almost positive. But my
Oh.
friend Imam Ismail called this community meeting at the local masjid, at the local mosque, and
Mhm.
a lot
Oh,
of the work
yes,
that
yes.
a lot of the work
Mm,
that I had been doing before coming to Cincinnati was in like interfaith spaces, and so as a
mhm,
result of that, I just a lot of my friends were from different faiths than what I grew up in. So he kind of had this community meeting, and you
mhm,
know, Trump had just been elected, and we're all kind of reeling, like, what does this mean? What is this
mm,
going to look like? And that first night, I remember people just kind of passing the mic around and kind of expressing their own concerns, but it kind of turned into sort of this grassrootsy sort of thing. And
mm,
eventually I was invited to develop some interfaith youth programming, kind of in the face of this polarizing society, community, city, that has
mhm,
become, I think, in my mind, so much worse even since then.
mm,
Of course, I was really sick at the time, right? And so,
mhm,
talk about identity, I felt to me like this was an opportunity to figure out who I was in this new phase of my life.
mm,
And I didn't know how much I was going to be able to handle or kind of, I don't know, make happen, manifest in the world. But I said yes and started trying. And
mm,
it was
mm,
in that context that I was exposed to Bespoken. And I went to a storytelling show. There's a really good chance that you hosted the storytelling show, Sarah. I don't
mm,
know that for sure, but is there a
mhm,
good chance you did? But I remember thinking this is the way to kind of address some of the social fragmentation that I've been invited to address through interfaith programming.
mm, mm, mm,
So I tried, and at the same time as I was trying, my health started to get better, and more opportunities started to come my way. And eventually, this volunteer kind of thing that I was doing, storytelling, interfaith kind of stuff, turned into a full-time gig. And
mhm,
now I'm doing really good, and I'm really grateful for this position that I'm able to occupy. I I couldn't have even like asked for this. I wouldn't have even been able to
mm,
imagine this as a potential path for my life, especially
mhm.
not at that moment of diagnosis. But even before then, I
Yeah.
couldn't have even begun to imagine what this could look like. So I'm really
Mhm.
grateful for that. Um, so what should I say? So Bespoken, mostly what we do
Well,
now is,
real quick,
yeah, go ahead.
before you go there, it's interesting to hear you say that because, and I think bits of this story are new to me. You just feel like such a instrumental part of that work and that storytelling culture that it's pretty fascinating. You couldn't have imagined it. I can't imagine it without you. So yeah, it was really,
Mhm.
it seems like kind of, written in the stars that that connection would really come to fruition. So um
Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely feels like a blessing for sure. I'm
mhm,
super grateful
mhm.
for it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So what are they, what's specific, and you're right. I was a storyteller for a while. It was such a treat to be involved. But what would you say the components or the tenets of Bespoken are now? What are some of the programming you guys are offering?
Yeah. So I think we've really, we haven't done some shows for a while. We haven't done shows for a while, although we're actually thinking about
Mhm.
starting it up again soon.
Mm,
But we've really kind of honed in on this idea of social isolation and how we can
mhm,
use story and small group story sharing in order to build community and to yeah, we love the word belonging, so we talk a lot about
mhm,
belonging. um
mhm,
yeah, so that looks like I've gone to schools a fair amount. I'm in religious communities still a fair amount. We do some stuff with other other nonprofits. We go to spaces that normally are already sort of convened in some way, and we try to give some of our approaches to that space in order to deepen belonging and understanding among the people that are there. So that one of those manifestations is story and process, which is what you and I do together. But we do a fair amount of other things as well.
Yeah. Well, I know project we've collaborated on recently wasn't, and the request wasn't, hey, come do some storytelling. But as I listened to this group and their challenge, I thought, okay, let me partner with Joey and we can create a way to unpack maybe a problem statement that we're not really sure about. And we use the storytelling as that, as that process. So I think it's, like you're saying, you can really engage anyone in any sector in this way, and probably also just organizational development, right? How do we create more leaders that are more in tune with storytelling as a way to, like you said, create that belonging? I know with story and process, it not only creates belonging, but there's a lot of healing that comes from that. So why don't you share a little bit about how it got started, and then we can talk about what you really what you were able to bring to our resilience project work over the past couple of years.
Yeah, well, maybe before I do that, I think it's worth noting that I think story, depending on kind of how you frame it, I think it's easy to hear this idea of story and to imagine people occupying the stage and like telling a front to end story. But that's not always how it looks like in our work. I mean, story is a way in my mind of defining yourself, of making sense of what the group is that you're a part of. It's a way to both cohere yourself to other people, but also divide yourself from other people, depending on the story that you're telling. I love thinking about to what extent we are the authors and the agents of our own story. We're the hero, the villain, the victim, the mentor. What is it? What's the role of the story that we're telling ourselves most often? So story does so much in the way of identity, community, culture. So because of that, there's a ton of applications for it, and that's why I think there's such varied kind of projects that we're working on. So story and process. Do you remember when the shooting was in Fountain Square?
I think it was 2018, if I'm remembering.
Yeah, I think that's right. So 2018, there was a shooting in downtown Cincinnati, and Brad Wise, who runs Bespoken with me, was actually there when it happened, and he called me like that afternoon and said we need to use our bag of tricks, which is something he says a lot, to try to kind of address what's going on. So we really quickly, in partnership with the Johnson Foundation and Shonda Sugg, we developed this kind of approach that put together some of our storytelling methodologies with some trauma-informed practices. And we imagined kind of a 2 to 3 hour long process where people who were victims of gun violence, initially the idea was for people who were part of the shooting that occurred, but it quickly kind of expanded outwards beyond that, for people who were victims of gun violence to be able to process their story in a small group setting, and begin to make meaning of it in a way that would begin or continue the healing journey. And when we started thinking about victims, we weren't just thinking about people who were shot, also people who had lost loved ones, and people who were community members of others where there had been a shooting, people who had been affected by a shooting in the local. I mean, so there's a bunch of things that were happening. So interestingly, what happened then is, like a year and a half later, the pandemic hit, and we had this huge collective trauma that we were all experiencing together. And so we used this technology and adjusted it a bit and started to apply it to this context. And so obviously this trauma wasn't nearly as acute as a gun, right? But it sure was affecting us, all of us, I think. And so we started telling stories about pandemic eve stories and stories of what life looked like during the pandemic and what we were thinking of as we started to look forward out after the pandemic in a small group setting with trauma-informed practices. And I think it gave my life some shape and some meaning in that really crazy time. And now, because we were like kind of adjusted to that setting and to this setting, or I mean, you and I don't necessarily do it in pandemic settings or with people who have experienced gun violence, but I think it can be applied for pretty much any setting like that, as long as there's some work done to adjust and to contextualize. So.
I love it. And I like how you call it technology, because it is, it's, the framework that's used and how things are facilitated and set up. It really is, it's an incredible offering. And I know with the Resilience Project, that's a grant that I've been a part of for about 6 or 7 years. And we invited you in for you and I to co-facilitate that this year ago. And we had a small group that joined, but the feedback was just phenomenal. We know an experience of trauma is unseen and unheard. So to have that carve out time as helping professionals to hear ourselves and then to be heard by a safe other really shifted and impacted how folks were able to even retain their positions, not move all the way into the burnout distress. I know my colleague Danae Riggs, who you know from that work, she still talks about today how we created that container at the very beginning, how she uses that practice, that technology in her work all the time now, So it's neat to hear how it can be applied. And even as we're talking, I'm thinking about there are more groups that could be offered this work, this workshop work in a way to address any number of issues. But I think that the main invitation to slow down and to process and to listen to one another, that's where a lot of the healing really comes in. I also know when we experience trauma, we're not necessarily having that connected to the language center of our brain or our consciousness, right? So if these things happen, early on in the lives before we could articulate them, I'm still curious on what it would mean to sit in circle and sit in groups and just bring in, what is the meaning making? What is this visceral experience I've been having in my body? And what have I made up about it? How has that influenced my life moving forward? So it just even retrospective ways we can even use the process outside of what we consciously are experiencing.
Yeah, I love that. I heard somebody say that this work isn't about changing what happened. It's about changing your relationship to what happened, right? And I think there's something just really, really powerful about those stories that sit deep, deep, deep in your bones, finding a safe enough context with people who have this, at least this perceived sense of unconditional positive regard towards you, right? And then you have the ability to bring those deep, deep stories into some type of language, and then that allows you to work with it and to be the author of your story. It doesn't have to have power over you anymore. You can be the one that's telling the story. So I think it's incredibly powerful to witness that work happening for other people. And I'm endlessly fascinated by how you talk about containers, but it's like this ineffable, undescribable sense of like, oh shit, this is happening. And I don't even know. I mean, we like sort of did it, but we like didn't do it all though either, and that I just love that so much. So
yeah. Well, I remember kind of logging off the sessions that we did with the group, and we both looked at each other like, like, so there is this hindsight, like we can put all the pieces together, but to watch the healing happen, to watch the emotion come out and shared vulnerability, it just is, it's really what drives me in the work. And so it's been great to be a part of the development of Story and Press. I know I got that call from Brad around the same time of like, this is what happens, what we're thinking, And so to be on y'all's radar and at that time was pretty special. So You said a minute ago you had, well, now I can't read my scribbles, but you said a yes, that there was a yes that you had in you, and you didn't know it was coming. What led you to the bespoken work? So I'm curious, what's your next yes? What's coming? What's
What's the
coming
yes
up?
I've been withholding? Is that what?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I did think about starting with the Peter Block connection question, but
Oh goodness. Um, huh. Yeah, I think well, I mean there's a lot, there's probably a million, right? The more I think about it, the more I think, but I mean yesterday I was in a meeting. I was actually in a meeting with Brad, and because of just sort of like the swirl of life, which I'm sure is not, you know, unique to me. But I've been finding myself going into tasks, conversations, meetings, and feeling a bit adversarial and combative just like off the jump. And so I was talking to Brad about that, and I was like, when I went into that meeting, I was like, I was ready to fight, and there's no reason to fight. Like, it's not the context. But so I think the yes I feel like I'm being invited to is like a softening and breathing and not giving in to the impulse to find an enemy wherever I can. So that's like at one level, and then a much more practical level. I think there is a project that we've been working on for a while now, that just doesn't quite feel like it's ready. And we've been circling and circling and circling. And I think we just need to say yes to it and just go for it.
Wow. All right, Brad, are you listening?
No, we're having this ongoing conversation because this is a thing. But you know, like so like you and I, we're about ready to start this thing with Story and Process. We're about to log on for the first time, and we have no idea how it's going to go, right? But there are some things that are happening there that make that start easier. Like, I know you, I trust you. We've done stuff like this a million times. It's going to be all right. We're going to sort it out, right?
Yeah.
But when you start to step into a brand new thing that you've never done before, you're taking risks for the first time in a different way, and you're excited about the possibility, there's just some, there's some stuff that comes up, self-doubt, or like, is this shit? Am I shit? We don't know what's going on here, right? So I think that yes, to saying yes to that is the real big thing, kind of professionally or in terms of bespoken. So
okay. Well, it's interesting to hear your self-reflection that you're leaning into softening and less fight energy is a new yes. Because perception, my perception of you is you're a soft dude, you're so grounded. So, so this fight Joey energy is fascinating, but very exciting to hear that. And you've just teased us now. So we're going to, when you launch that, yes, we'll be sure to celebrate it with you
cool.
Through our newsletter. But thanks for spending some time today, Joey. And I just respect you so much, and I'm so glad we get to keep collaborating. And you're always down. I literally just pick up the phone. Want to do this thing? And you give me lots of yeses. So that's
totally.
Hope to continue.
Yeah, there's a series of people in my life who I will always say yes to collaborating with and working with, and you are absolutely one of those people. So
all right, well, it's recorded, so it's going out. All right, well, have a good rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thanks.